Anybody know what Eros is? Nobody in here knows. Yeah, okay, well, it's okay to mention it in church, I mean.
That's a sample of our latest president, Jimmy Carter, teaching a Sunday school lesson. Our guest on this edition of Conversation from Studio 5 is singer, songwriter, and best-selling author Andrew Greer. Greer turned Jimmy Carter's Sunday school lessons into a book. It's called More Than a President, Sundays with Jimmy Carter. So I feel like the last time we spoke, we were talking about the documentary. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah, and it was still in motion.
Yeah.
Yes, I know, and I mean, that's a several-year thing, you know what I mean? Or at least what I hear, you know, the average of documentaries, it seems like it's always, I've heard 8 to 10 years, so we did it in 4, so I feel we beat the averages.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Now, in the throes of that, we discover writings from Jimmy Carter?
Well, this is where, as far as where I discovered those writings, yes, I would say, because I've actually moved to Plains, Georgia. I don't know if you know that, from Nashville to Plains. So it's through that whole kind of transition, which the documentary introduced me to the town, to the people, to the place, to the Carters, and then it just kind of took up the space in me, moved, and that's where the writings then were kind of discovered in the church library. So.
Wow, and you're a member of that church now.
Yeah. A very small church, you know, 30, 40 people on a good Sunday. Of course, there were hundreds that were visiting when President Carter was teaching Sunday school regularly. But yes, I'm a member of Maranatha Baptist Church in Plains, Georgia now.
So tell me about More Than a President, Sundays with Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, the book, you know, it really, my first connection with Plains, Georgia, long before I directed Plain Spoken and wrote that for PBS, it was probably a couple years after I graduated from college. I was full into my songwriter career, and I learned that President Carter, you know, a former leader of the free world, taught Sunday school at the small A-frame church in a town of 500 people in Southwest Georgia. It was unbelievable to me, especially considering President and Mrs. Carter's legacies as humanitarians post-presidency. They were all over the world working for freedom in different ways and working to eradicate disease, that they would commit, and he would commit essentially half of his weekends, half of his Sundays a year to come teach Sunday school in this small town. Of course, his lifelong hometown just blew me away. So I went and experienced it, and I was sold from the beginning, Efrem. I mean, I don't know why I didn't move 20 years ago, except that I love Nashville and I love this whole area. But those lessons in that book, there are 15 chapters. His lessons have never really fully been published. There was a devotional about 15 years ago when he was still alive, of deeply, deeply edited into kind of sound bite, you know, meant for your morning coffee kind of thing. But we really wanted to dig in deeper because of the insights that he provides as a part of world history, and then actually teaching from a text that he loves, the Bible, but that also has its own place in a world in ancient history. So kind of marrying that history together provides really, I think, a unique, you know, texture to read through. So this is more of a chapter book. It's more of a reading book. I then wrote introductions to each of the sections, section by decades, to kind of bring in the Carter context. How was their faith playing out in the world? How was what he was teaching about also applying in his life, not just what was he asking from the classroom?
If you had to pull out the greatest lesson, what would it be?
Well, it truly is. I mean, he was always circling back to Matthew 22, you know, love God, love your neighbor, all the law and the prophets hinge on these two things. I think the way that he hit on love came through his experience in the world and his relationships with people, and that he was always challenging the us versus them thing, which I think culturally we're even deeper, you know, we're knee deep into this us versus them kind of mentality, regardless of who us is and who them is. And he was always highlighting that we don't set the table. You know, God has set the table and has invited everyone to that table. So our opportunity is simply the gift of love. It's the love we have received by God first, and then that we can give to others. So it circles back to love, but through that challenging myself, which he was always saying, I have to challenge myself. We all have our natural biases, our natural prejudices, our natural ways of kind of distancing ourselves from others we don't understand or don't look like us or don't think like us. And he was saying that the very life of Jesus and the very context of these scriptures are urging us to confront our own selves, to stretch our minds, stretch our hearts, and therefore include more people.
Nice. I know that Mike Pence
Yeah,
read the
isn't
book.
that interesting?
Yeah, and I love one of the things he said. He said that he
He's a
inspired.
Republican.
Yes, and he said he inspired generations of believers in both political parties, including me. In this new book, Andrew Greer invites future generations to take a seat in a pew and listen in on the Sunday school lessons of this good and great man.
Mm-hmm. It's almost kind of astonishing, I think, in our modern world and in modern politics, that there would be something that would get us across the aisle. It seems that those things are fewer and fewer that really help us to find a place to meet. So I love, as someone who's attempting to follow Jesus, that the way of Jesus could still potentially be that poignant, be that tender, be that impactful, be that human and divine, that it doesn't matter who I'm voting for today, or it doesn't matter what news media station I'm watching today. There is a meeting point for us, and that meeting point is Jesus. And so I think, Vice President Pence's words are just an example of that two people from different parties would have such great respect for one another, but also even on a deeper level would have a fellowship, and that fellowship is in trying to follow the same person, Jesus.
Book's been out for a little bit now, a few days.
Yeah.
What's been the reaction thus far?
It's number one. It's been really cool to see it. I mean, charts are charts, but I'm a human being, so I love to see it top the charts. So to see people really resonating with it, to see them interested in this aspect of President Carter's life. He has been very well celebrated in the last few years as his health was getting more frail. We knew that as he went into hospice care, his transparency about that. It was really beautiful to see the tributes come out since he's passed away at the end of last year. That's continued. I love that this content, because I didn't know. I thought this may be extremely niche to have Sunday school lessons from a president. But maybe that says something about our own search, our own continual search for, I think, peace. And that always is a search through our spirituality. And then that people would land here, I feel is just lovely, because I still truly believe that Jesus is the anchor for peace. I mean, I was thinking the other day, and I've been on book tour, and I was thinking of a song, that old Andre song, Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other. Jesus is the way. It's simple, or it sings simple, but it's profound in its living out, and this is some of that living out through just one person.
You actually did the last interview.
Yeah, we didn't know.
You didn't know then. What do you remember most about that?
Oh, well, I remember the humility. I remember the frailty, that was in, he would live another couple years, but it just got to where they really could not grant those kind of things anymore for public consumption, interviews, etc. So deeply honored, but the last question I asked him was, if you could leave this world with one message, what would that be? After all this life experience, all these adventures, getting to experience things and people that many of us may not get to just by nature of access, And he said that the world would follow, that the teachings of Jesus Christ would be integrated or adopted throughout the world. And his interpretation of that is that we would be treated equally, and we would love each other without condition. And so that even the last, kind of message, or the last words of that interview, even though we spoke again after that, of course, would come back to Jesus. I don't know. It's just, Efrem, I don't know if you're with me on this, but it's phenomenal to think of someone who's ascended into the most powerful, arguably the most powerful position in the world, to still say that true power comes from digging down deep to lift up high, which is the example, right, that we've been given, the humility of the person that we follow. Just to see that fumbling attempt of a former president trying to do that means, well, maybe I can fumble in my attempt to do that too, in my fumbling way,
Now, that, as you said, was the last interview, but you did have further conversations with him following. Do you remember the last conversation?
Well, it would have been at church. A lot of because of their age, church was one of the last places they were really able to still come and be a part of. And so it had something to do with me being late to go play the piano. It's a small church. He's a very punctual person. I'm extremely, is it impunctual? I don't know what the right word is. I'm late all the time. And also I just was enjoying, kneeling down by his pew and talking with him. And he had a twinkle in his eye about it, but he did want me to get up and go. He loved music. She loved music. And he especially loved piano music, and that's my primary instrument from my childhood. So it's cool to be able to have, I've always been drawn to older people, and to be able, I think music is partly why, music being my whole background, music is such a featherbed, for living. And when life gets really fragile and we wonder maybe why we're still around with all these aches and pains if you're 98, 99, I think music gives the body and the spirit some sense of its fullness of being, and so I was happy to be able to contribute into that conversation.
Were you able to sit in and be on the receiving end of the Sunday school lessons at any point?
Yes. My very first, a few times, but my very first trip into Plains, experience with Plains, it's very folksy. It's beautifully backwards in all the right ways. You know what I mean? I live there now, so I'm part of the uniqueness, I think. But it was right after college, a couple years. I got some friends who may have been kind of willing fools, not knowing what they were walking into, and we drove down there from Nashville. And what's interesting is, I didn't indicate this in the book, but one of the chapters is December 9th, 2007. And that's the first Sunday I ever visited. And I was listening to the tape. It happens to be I listened to hundreds to see which might translate best to the page. It did translate well, and I was thrilled because he would always call out at the beginning of lessons, where's everybody from? You'd have people from China, from Ghana, you'd have rabbis and imams and pastors, and then people from all kinds of states. And I heard, some dummy in the back go, Tennessee, and it was me. I was like, this feels very full circle. Things we don't know how they kind of come back into play, and so yes, I was able to experience it.
You remember the lesson?
Yes, absolutely. It was during Advent season, and so it was from Luke, but it was about Mary's song, the Magnificat. But it was about calling, and are we receptive? When we are called, regardless of what fear what that inspires in us, do we still have the courage to humble ourselves to that calling and see how it plays out, regardless of how equipped we feel, or regardless of what cultural kind of prejudices? This was a young single woman pregnant, and without much explanation, at least not rational explanation. Well, when we're called, there may be elements. There may be a pushback from how people look at us, perceive us, think about us, or do we have that courage, to serve?
Nice. Do you feel this was part of your calling, to share his story?
Oh, that's a sweet thought. I don't know, calling's so mysterious, isn't it? My fumbling attempt to follow Jesus, and if that intersected with some of President Carter's legacy, lucky me. Lucky me.
What do you think he would think?
Oh, I don't know. He'd probably find the typos. He was a very accomplished author, as you know, and himself. But he did know that the project was coming out, and he did know that I was stewarding it. And actually, a woman that works very closely with him, who works out of Atlanta, she was going through some things in the house. I mean, this is before he he passed away, and he showed her this binder of transcripts of the Sunday school lessons he taught while president of the United States. That's right, which we included a couple. And he had ordered transcriptions of them after he got back home from the White House and went in and made handwritten notes about his own lessons. And she said, would these perhaps be helpful? He thought maybe so. And so I at least know that was helpful to me, to know he knew and that there was no hesitation. I hope that he would be honored, that people would have interest in his insights into Scripture. And hopefully that some of the applications that he finds from Scripture for himself, and he asks the congregation to also take with them, hopefully readers will take with them too. Yeah, I think that would be the biggest honor to President Carter, is that people would apply these beautiful concepts in the gospel of humility and love.
He was very plain-spoken and...
Yes, the whole town of Plains, he came from Plains for sure. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to know what people think, go to Plains. It's been... my dad said to me when I was thinking about moving down there, I was kind of splitting my time for a while, and I was kind of wrestling with, should I actually move down to Plains? And he said, there's only a few times in our life where the people and place provide a space where our soul is truly at rest. And he said, when that happens for any one of us, we must go. And I think that's why they stayed. I think that was always. I think they were born into a people and a place that provided rest for their soul. I think that's true for a lot of people in Plains, and now I'm lucky to count myself as one of them.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for this.
No, thank you for being one more part of expressing it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
More Than a President, Sundays with Jimmy Carter is available wherever you purchase your reading material. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's edition of Conversations from Studio 5. We appreciate you making this your weekly destination for uplifting interviews with a strong focus on faith. For more information on the show, be sure to check out our Facebook page. And you can find us on Instagram simply by searching Studio 5. Look forward to seeing you again right here next week on the podcast.